Western Cape is in the midst of a clampdown on violent crime, particularly gang and drug violence in the Cape Flats. Now, the South African National Defence Force has been roped in to help the police deal with the gangs. While some have welcomed the presence of the army in the streets, others have slammed the move, saying it could make the situation worse. Well, one of the areas that appears to be getting on top of gang and drug violence is Westbury, right here in Johannesburg. Residents in the area took to the streets last year, urging police to tackle gangsterism and drug abuse in the community. And to talk about some of the interventions in Westbury, I'm joined in the studio by two members of the Westbury Community, Shahiem Ismail and Pastor Emeleo du Plessis. Gentlemen, a very good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Good evening to your listeners, to your viewers. Sorry, man. That's always radio. Good evening.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Good evening to all the young children that are still awake.
Yeah. Now, I understand that since the arrival of the new Sophia Town Station Commander,
Yes.
Brigadier Alfred Ndebele, the situation has pretty much improved, or the violence has lessened there. Are you also of their view? Do you see that happening?
Yes, but also we must bear in mind it's just not because of the replacement of the new station commander. We remember we also got a new provincial commission in the province, and it's still part of the model. It was part of our plea to the national minister to remove and to restructure the Sophia Town police station, which has happened very well. And we are still in our time frame to continue to build the model for other communities, to see what we are doing currently and how we are dealing with the violence and how we are trying to move out of gangsterism and drugs within our communities. So it's still part of the rollout since the intervention of the national minister, Minister Becky Tele, at that time when he came to Westbury, when we were really in a crisis situation. And I think, yes, it's just we're running through it. So yeah, the new station commander, very vibrant, very active. Yeah. We must applaud him for his efforts, and he's really doing well currently. And he's on the ball, and I hope it can stay that way for the next 5 years, for as long as he's there. Yeah. And whoever will replace him will have to learn from that if one doesn't perform, we will replace you. And that is the motto in our communities, and that is a message I want to send to the people in other communities, yeah. Especially where this type of violence are happening in the Western Cape and Eastern Cape, where it's a crisis. And that is where it starts, at your local police station. If your station commander cannot deal with that type of violence, whether he's got resources or not resourced, he needs to be removed, or she needs to be removed to another station and find somebody new with new ideas and that wants to work with the communities to resolve the problems.
You know, I just hope that this kind of message filters down to each and every public office bearer in South Africa, that if they don't perform, they get removed. Now, I want us to analyze the gangsterism in Westbury. Is it more drug-related, or is it more organized crime?
Simply a good evening. I would think it's both. I think it's both, but mostly it's drugs. And also, what I think, it's also to do with identity, seeking identity. That's why guys are getting involved in gangsterism. And it's also something that they have inherited, because gangsterism has been coming on for years and years in not just Westbury, but Cape Town, all over. So it's things that people inherit. See that people are in gangsterism, they drop out of school, they become gangsters, and they flourish, they prosper, they do well. So the youngsters see these things. So these guys become their own models. And so they just go into gangsterism because it's easy money. Mm-hmm. It's easy money. I don't have to educate myself. I can just do 1, 2, 3, and it's a quick, rich scheme.
Are there any similarities between Westbury and Cape Town, or the Western Cape?
Yes, there is.
Yes. Yeah.
There is, I would say. And it's sorry to say this, that most of our colored areas, so-called colored areas, are affected by gangsterism. It's not that it's not in the other areas, but I think mostly that our colored areas are affected, yeah, mostly with gangsterism. So there's a lot of similarities, what's happening there and what's happening in Johannesburg.
So now, given the improvement in the situation in Westbury, any lessons that other communities which are gang-ravaged can learn from what's happening in Westbury?
Sure, Caesar. It starts with the leadership of the communities. The leadership needs to be cleaned. Do not come into these things and trying to help clean up the blood on our streets and think you're going to make a quick dime, or you're going to get, it's not a quick rich scheme where you become rich overnight or you don't become rich at all. You have to do it from the heart, and you have to be a clean leader. And you have to draw in the youth. Very important. And you must never get yourself corrupted in this instance, because then everything fails. Because a lot of people look up to leaderships in the communities. And I think the time has come where we need to root out, in many communities, the old leaders that are completely just stagnated throughout structures such as your CPFs, your school governing bodies, those type of things that are not working in those communities. These are structures that are being led by certain community people. We have to deal, a lesson to many other communities, what we've done in Westbury. We started doing our own research. We've examined ourselves to see are we really on the right track, are we moving forward. It's to rid leaders that have become stagnated and believing into themselves and not into the community. So we are currently now on a phase in Westbury where we are saying we're taking it to the next level. September is going to be the most busiest month in Westbury for our stakeholders, that we will be coming around with a new system, how to replace the CPF. They need to move on. We need to get rid of a CPF. It's dysfunctional. We need to interact with the Minister of Education, provincially and nationally. How do we start restructuring for the next term? All these school governing bodies, all structures that are not working within these communities.
And I think we need to start by diagnosing the problems in the CPF. What went wrong?
Our CPFs, as I say, they become stagnated. You must remember it's a volunteer process. People do not get paid on these structures. A lot of people, when the election comes together, it's either been done on party political tickets, where a certain party feels that they need to have the majority in these structures. And that is where we go wrong, because the structure has got guidelines and rules that you need to have every stakeholder on the community involved in the CPFs. It's about crime, to manage it. And how do we go with programs? You need to bring programs out to find solutions to deal with these type of things. And unfortunately in our community, our CPF has not been really there on the ball in terms of what has happened for the past 3-4 years, in terms of how many people were killed, infested, how many drugs came into our communities, and how many devious crimes was committed under their sitting in that office. And also we cannot keep the communities at ransom and say that I'm a CPF, I'm not part of the community. You need to remain part of the community as long as you serve on these structures. And that is where we go wrong in many of the communities. You've got people sitting in these structures that are very important key structures that cost people their lives. That people are like, it's just a normal day in the office, or we can just co-opt anybody we want to feel, just call out somebody when somebody drops off. The processes that they are following, it's not the due process that's been given by government compliance. So we need to revisit. Yeah, a lot of mistakes was made for the past 24 years, or 22 years in democracy. Certain structures are working, certain structures are dysfunctional. And in these type of communities, those structures needs to be identified and needs to be redone. So that is where we are currently. But also coming to the community, must bear in mind what we've also picked up is there's a lot of community corruption, because we tend to harbor police corruption into this gangsterism and drug dealing. We are quick in communities to say police are corrupt, but within our communities we need to also root out community corruption, where we have certain NPOs, NGOs, everybody piggybacking on this, asking for funding all over the world, going around with false projects, saying that they are dealing with gangsterism and drugs. And then many of them get the funding that needs to help the community, and then they disappear and get a fancy house, or they are gone. And that leaves the community at the same place, and we do not move forward. So that is part of community corruption, which we also discussed with the national minister, to say we need to monitor this and make sure, even through the international relations minister, to make sure any funding from any corner that comes into these communities must be controlled by a certain body, which could be your stakeholders forum, to make sure that the work is being done and we are seeing change. And the same applies to government funding, social development, whatever departments are funding these organizations, they need to be monitored and be held accountable. But the other lesson we've learned, and where we are today, let us not get it wrong. There are still some shooting in Westbury. There are still at night various shootings taking place, and we are aware of it, and the police is aware of it. But let's not take away credit where credit is due. Since the new arrival of the new station commander, the new provincial commissioner, a lot has been done, a lot of arrest has taken place, a lot of action has been done from the police. Continuously there are visible policing, continuously patrolling the streets, but the community needs to get itself in order.
But then how well resourced are the police?
Currently they are not As a station, I'm not going to answer for them. I'm not a spokesperson for the police. That's with all respect to yourselves and to the viewers out there and to the police.
But from what you've seen on the ground, are they well resourced?
We can say they are also using private security companies. They are also using patrolling companies within certain communities. So I can say they are not really well equipped, but they are coping with the situation currently in Westbury. That is my viewpoint. I think that a lot more needs to be done towards the station. It needs full capacity in terms of your gangster unit must be fully capacitated, your drug unit must be fully capacitated, your firearm unit, because you are dealing with firearms, you're dealing with drugs, you're dealing with gangsterism. It needs to be fully capacitated and properly structured into that precinct where you have this type of problems, and then we move forward. And this is also a big lack in the Western Cape and in other communities, that these units are still not properly structured.
Sure.
They are not properly functioning. You need a proper good intelligence system where they can infiltrate these communities, because you are dealing with a multi-billion rand industry. You're not dealing with a popcorn machine. You are dealing with a multi-billion rand industry that destroys lives, that causes people to die. To us, it's about, and to myself and to many other leaders that we are sitting with around the table continuously, it's about saving a life. It doesn't matter whose life. A life, not to die like that. Not to pick up your child or your mother, your son or your father.
Yeah, by all means, lives, of course, they need to be saved. But how then do we root this? Because gangsterism has become so entrenched in communities like Westbury and the Cape Flats that, and we see young boys being groomed towards gangsterism, and they are apparently so keen, because as you mentioned, I mean, it's a business, it's quick money. How do we root this one out?
And these guys, these guys have found a way to draw these guys in, and because of poverty, unemployment, these guys are being lured in to participate in gangstering. Because, I mean, give him 5,000 rand to ABC for me, and these guys get involved in it. So it's easy, and
they're easily hooked.
Yeah. So a solution to the problem or to the challenge that we are facing: create jobs, not just jobs, also entrepreneurship as well. Create businesses, get these youngsters involved, throw these youngsters in, have different programs.
Who's supposed to do that?
Can I just come in?
Yeah, please come in.
I think who's supposed, Apostle Mello is quite correct.
Yeah.
But who's supposed to do it? Where does it lies? And all communities in South Africa must continue to keep the government accountable and responsible for those programs. Responsible. Remember, we are in a Cyril Ramaphosa era. We are no longer in the past era. This era is a good era. And the president of this country has said on his maiden speech, being inaugurated, and said, any minister that does not does his or her work needs to be fired. It needs to, after 3 months, we need to see some progress. Any premier that doesn't perform needs to be replaced. And who keeps them on their toes? It's the communities. So I'm saying to the other communities, what we've done in the Westbury community, you need to make a noise. You need to march. Let's do it orderly. Let's do it constructively. Let's apply legally for these marches. In the Western Cape and other communities, let's make a noise. Let's march. The parliament is right on your doorstep. Go and present your grievances. Make a noise every second week. There needs to be not an uprising, a march. Legally march. And if government don't come back, let's keep them accountable. We cannot have an MEC that are complaining to the community about violence. That MEC is there, he must be part of the solution and not complain to the communities. Cannot be sitting with councillors that are complaining, where councillors have been elected, local government councillors in communities that are there to resolve. I like the system that I've seen, and the councillor in, I think it's Bonteheuwel, I stand to be corrected, where I've seen the councillor on national TV and the structure they've put together in terms of getting the entire community to become patrollers and to be involved, including with the police. And that is constructiveness from a councillor that gets involved. But in various communities, like our communities, we'll have one councillor on the floor. Councillors and government is sitting with this idea of fourth revolution issue that they need to remote control communities from a certain office and just make a tick box that I'm communicating with my community. These communities, it doesn't work. These communities want 24-hour direct involvement on the floor. If a minister, an example, our new MEC, not new MEC, she's been there, Faith Masibuku, in our province. She's been reappointed to safety and security. She was there. She knows Westbury. She knows the issues in our communities. If that minister doesn't respond to us, In terms, we haven't started with our provincial government as yet because of them getting settled in and starting to get to grips to what needs to be done for the next 5 years. So we will be attacking them, not physically, but attacking them in terms of, we need your attention in these communities. In the next coming month, it's going to be very busy. So we'll be flooding the mayor of Johannesburg, Herman Mashaba, and next about his councillors.
Can the army solve this problem, though?
The army is not a policing.
Yeah.
You're welcome to
Can
come.
I come in there? I don't think so. And it has been proven. Whilst the army has been in Cape Town, there's still killings. So the army is not trained first and foremost for community challenges. Army is trained to work on the borders and kill people. They're not trained for this type of work. Solution to our problem and our challenge that we have, first and foremost, and because I'm a religious leader, I'm a pastor, we need to return back to God. We need to acknowledge God. We need to come back to basics. We need to, and it's not the fact that we don't understand these things. We do understand that we cannot solve our problems alone. We need, first and foremost, divine intervention, yes. And that is from God. And that is what the church needs to do, and what the church is currently doing. So having divine interventions by praying, seeking the face of God, fasting. And also earlier on when you alluded to the fact that because of the new brigadier and all that, I believe it is a holistic, a collective, where the church has also played a role in seeking the face of God, in praying and trusting the Lord for breakthrough.
So just how influential is religion or religious bodies in such communities?
In our community, I can only speak for our community.
Yeah.
We are very involved in a lot of interventions that we are doing, open airs that we are having. Currently, we are working in the schools because we know that the challenges is within our schools. We also have grouped have a partnership with SABC, where we work with SABC, hand in hand with SABC as the church. And we go into schools and we go into clinics and we go and pray, even at hot spots as well. Okay. And there's a difference. But what I wanted to also say, not just the fact that we need to return to God, but I also believe that the solution is in the house, meaning that the solution needs to come from us, within. We don't need the army to come in. We need to solve our own problems. We need to take responsibility. We need to be accountable. We need to take ownership. Because I believe that we need to develop leaders within our communities. We have so many good people. Westbury is not a bad place. Westbury is a good place, surrounding areas, all the colored areas. I just think that we need to find ourselves. We need to take ownership and we need to come back to basics. Yep. Basics, values, morals that the old people have raised us with. We need to come back to that. Yeah.
I mean, it's basically bread and butter issues that have exacerbated this problem. I mean, as you've mentioned, these people are hungry and they wouldn't say no to a quick 5,000 rand for them to join the army. In as much as you're making a valid point that they need to go back to God, they need to uphold, ethical values and value systems, but then they still need to eat.
Yeah, totally. That's what I'm saying. We start there, but then we also have to develop within. We need to educate, because that is also another thing, is we need to educate. We need to cultivate a culture of learning within our community. And that is also one thing that I need to encourage the colored people, that we need to learn. We need to educate ourselves. We should not drop out of school and roam around the streets. We need to educate ourselves, because that is the way to go. Because how are we going to be able to fill the job market? How are we going to be able to make a difference within the economy if we don't educate ourselves? So my plea to our so-called colored brothers and sisters is that we need to educate ourselves. We need to cultivate that culture of learning. Yes. I spoke to Shahiem and I say we have this challenge where we find jobs for our youngsters, and the first month when they receive their salary, they drop off the boat. They just leave, because now we have a little bit of money. And also another thing about our community is that we need to learn to start from the bottom. You cannot start from the top. You have to start from the bottom, learn how to crawl before you can walk.
Sure.
And so it's about education, and fill ourselves with knowledge. True. And that will bring us out of the mess that we are in.
True.
Can I just add on to the issue of the army in the Western Cape? We must remember where it started from. Last year, the provincial government insisted that they need the army to be deployed to the Western Cape. And then the national government ministry said it's not a viable idea. But we must also bear in mind it was considered from all angles, with the community and the policing and the structures in Cape Town. That is how I followed it. And what happened is that the situation in Cape Town has become completely out of control. Police were shot and killed. Policemen and women were shot in Western Cape. And that's an attack on the state. And definitely the type of firearms and the type of situation that these police find themselves in the Western Cape is completely different in terms of Westbury and Johannesburg. That those guys are using hardcore firearms to shoot at these police. And these guys go in there with a normal, a non-bulletproof vehicle. They go with normal bulletproofs and those type of things. So the army was brought in as a massive support base in terms of calming the situation. So somewhere you need, and I don't think they'll be very long in Cape Town, next 3 months. They would have been withdrawn, but not because of the appeal of certain politicians. There would be a system where, similar to what happened in Westbury, eventually the TRT will have to be withdrawn. Eventually they will have to be taken out of the community, and your normal policing will have to start again. So it's just there to stabilize. That's according to how I see it. And the communities themselves has cried out to say, we need help.
Isn't it concerning though that the gang operations all across South Africa seem to be connected? There seems to be a network of these gangs.
It's logic. It's the trade. It's the dealings and the wheelings, and it's what we faced with. We faced with a massive multi-billionaire industry. If you look at the airports, if you look at how many times drugs have been seized here, there, it's a massive ring of trade. And the same as the firearms, it's a ring of trade.
Yeah.
So it is that communities are connected in this thing. But how do we break that connection? It's a reality in Westbury. A lot of Cape Townians was arrested. A lot of Cape Townians were shot and killed in Westbury. Some have been sentenced, coming from Cape Town all the way to commit devious crimes here.
Unfortunately, gentlemen, we don't have much time, but just before I let you go, what's your next phase of your drive to clean Westbury?
Our next phases will be starting off in September, our busiest month, because we are preparing for those that are being released from prison, early releases. So we're also preparing for the coming festive. And we start up a 3-month plan. Every time we sit as stakeholders, we get up a 3-month plan collectively with the South African Police Services, with the province and with the local station and the national government. But also, we will be coming up with a men's, in the next 2 weeks, we'll be having a massive men's gathering and then a women's gathering. But we're also launching in September the 24th an anti-gangster, anti-drug campaign and a structure that will deal nationally. At the UJ on the 24th, we will invite quite a lot of stakeholders from all over to help us move out of this. Okay. It's an anti-gangsterism. It's an organization that was established, which we are all part of it. And it's nationally, we hope to reach Cape Town and all other communities. It's not about politics, it's about saving lives and about changing our communities.
Gentlemen, we thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
All
Thanks,
right.
guys.
That was Shahiem, Ismail and Apostle Emeleo du Plessis, community leaders in Westbury in Johannesburg.